This is the Falls Free Press podcast, featuring bonus content from our online and print publication. Today's guest is Anthony Gomez, Cuyahoga Falls City School District Board of Education member. All right, so this is the Falls Free Press podcast, and we're here today with Cuyahoga Falls City School District Board member Anthony Gomez. Anthony, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So you successfully won your campaign in 2017, and you took over in January?
Yes, January 10th.
Okay, so you've been through one full semester so far.
Yes.
Okay, and how have you found it?
It's busier than I think people realize. We have 9 school buildings in our district that are actively used for our students, and I don't think people in the community realize how much is going on and how many good things are happening in the school district. It's unfortunate sometimes that we only hear about the challenges, but I mean, myself and the other 4 board members, we're constantly going to performances and hearing kids give speeches and having science fairs and presentations and things about learning about small business strategies like the Lemonade Day we had last weekend. It's just amazing how many positive things are happening in our district despite the challenges we might have.
Apart from the lemonade thing, can you give us a specific example of something you've seen or, recently?
Well, it was in April, we had our spring musical that we have every year, and it was Annie. And, Annie, everybody knows the songs, everybody knows the lyrics, everybody knows the characters, and yet they do it in such a way that you're blown away and that you're surprised somehow by this musical that you've seen how many adaptations of, you've seen it how many times, you know the song they're going to sing, and yet you're still surprised by the way in which they present it. And I think it just really goes to show the creativity that our kids have, and we've always been known for a strong musical and arts as a district. So
Awesome. Yeah, I think high school musicals sometimes get a bad rap, but those students are certainly talented, and I think a lot of the theater kids, as they might refer to themselves, end up going on to do really cool stuff like in acting and maybe go on to performing arts school and stuff like that.
Well, and that's one of the cool things that we have with our 6th district compact. I believe it's at Talmadge, that there's actually a performing arts academy that kids can get in their junior and senior years as like a career tech program.
Oh, like a vocational school
Yes.
kind of. Oh, awesome. I didn't even know about that. Great. Okay, so you're on the school board about 3 months, and now we have heard that Equality Ohio, the LGBTQ advocacy group based in Columbus, came to address the school board to suggest some policy changes and things that could protect LGBTQ students. I'm wondering how that came about. Did you invite Equality Ohio? Do you know the woman who came personally, or did they suggest coming?
Yeah, so we had Gwen Stembridge come from Equality Ohio. She's their Northeast Ohio Regional Director, and she's done a lot of work in other progressive groups that I'm involved with, as well as she was a driving force behind the Akron United campaign that got comprehensive non-discrimination policies for the city of Akron. She was involved in Kent and just recently in South Euclid as well. So I've seen her work, and I knew her from other things. And even before I was sworn into the school board, she and I actually met because I knew this is something I wanted to do. This is something I wanted to push for once I did get sworn in. And there's this kind of like process in between when you get sworn in and when you get elected where you just kind of like meet everybody to get to know them. And I used it as a means to talk about what I want to get accomplished. And this is one of the things that I made sure everyone knew I was going to be pushing for, and I was going to be pushing for pretty quickly.
So after you won the election and before you were sworn in, you got in touch with Gwen Stembridge from Equality Ohio to bring her, hopefully, before the school board to suggest policies.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that ended up happening April 23rd?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay. And can you give us kind of a sense of what she had to say, or?
So Gwen gave her presentation, which is her very basic presentation. If you're involved in LGBTQ plus advocacy, you've probably seen it before. And then she starts with the basics. She wants to make sure that we're all on the same playing field in terms of understanding what sex and gender identity are, how they're similar, how they're different, and what all the letters stand for in our LGBTQ alphabet. So I think that's very important because so often people don't understand what that actually means. They think that gay is just this all-encompassing term, but people identify in different ways, and how they identify is going to come out and how they express themselves and how we policy around those expressions to make sure that we're allowing for appropriate ones that encourage educational opportunities for kids are going to matter at the end of the day. So it was important to me that we just could even the playing field in terms of knowledge so that everyone know what we were actually trying to do going forward. We don't have the issue in terms of a lot of municipalities do, and that people, religious groups are going to get angry because, you're going to try to force them to marry gay people because you're passing this. We don't have power over that. What we have power over are the 600 staff we employ and the 4,700 students that we have. So it's those 5,300 people that we're trying to protect. It really doesn't have a lot to do with the 46,000 people in the community that we represent. It's really focused in on the people that we have the control and the power over. How can we keep our staff members safe and happy and able to express themselves, and how can we do the same for our students?
Sure. And so just for the sake of, people listening who may not be familiar with this issue, so LGBTQ is lesbian, bisexual, gay, transgender, and then the Q now is queer. It's kind of the same way. It's like sort of taken back a derogatory term to kind of be an all-encompassing term for the many different ways in which people identify in terms of gender and gender performativity.
Yeah, I'm kind of an old school gay person in terms of I don't really like the word queer, but there are younger people that are trying to help reclaim that word, and that's how they identify. So to me, good for them. For me, it's not how I would ever choose to identify because it's still associated more with negativity. I mean, I graduated 10 years ago. It's a very different world. People weren't out. There wasn't a GSA in our high school. And now, kids are openly who they are. We had a kid that identifies with they pronouns and has a gender neutral name, and that's how they were acknowledged at graduation. So that wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. So it's just a generational divide where kids these days feel, I think, a little bit more empowered to use things that were used against them as a positive, where people like me that are kind of more in the old school maybe feel a little bit more uncomfortable about that because it was more of a negative thing in our lives.
Sure, it was an insult.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And can you talk about, you mentioned the GSA. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, GSAs are often known as gay straight alliances, but there's a movement right now to change the names of them to be more inclusive. So ours is a gender and sexual orientation alliance, and it's at the high school. Our mental health counselor, Rachel Muster, at the high school is in charge of that. She's the faculty advisor, and then it's student driven, and they do things to promote inclusion in the schools.
So is some of what you guys are considering doing in terms of the new policies intended to also protect faculty who might be members of the LGBTQ community as well?
Yeah, even when I was a student there, people knew of faculty members, but it was much more dangerous. 2008 were right after the 2004 election where President Bush was reelected and marriage equality was basically made illegal in Ohio. So I think there was a lot more sensitivity back then. Yeah. But I mean, one of the things I want to do is everybody might know about a teacher, but they're not comfortable talking about it because in Ohio, you can lose your job for that reason. And I don't believe that our school district would do that, but we don't have the protections to say that we won't.
Right. And so this was really the impetus for Gwen Stembridge with Equality Ohio coming here to help address how the school board, which includes you, and who are the other members of the school board now?
Karen Schofield, Kathy Moffett, Patty White, and Dave Martin.
Okay. And so her point was to help you guys as a board determine how to create policies that are going to protect teachers and students so that if something like that comes out for a teacher, they don't have to worry about losing their job and students can feel safe at school.
Well, just so that people can be who they are without repercussion. I think to say it in a positive way, that's what it is. It's to allow people to be whoever they were made to be without there being punishment for them being who they were made to be.
Okay, great. All right, and so she came on April 23rd. She addressed the school board, suggested some policy changes, and you guys Is your intent to adopt all the changes that she suggested? Did you build upon those changes, reject certain aspects of them?
Well, what Gwen and I did is we discussed where we were at as a district and what our vision would be for where it could be. So where we are at is our policies. We have two policies really that I was working on here. It's policy 3, which is for general personnel, and it's equal opportunity employment. And it talks about the different types of groups of people that we protect in terms of employment: race, color, religion, military status, national origin, creed or ancestry, age, sex, marital status, disability, or genetic information. And that's a lot of things, and that's a lot of good things that we should protect, but we don't have anything in there for gender identity or sexual orientation. And then policy 7's, it's under our instructional program policies. It's our equal educational opportunity, so it's our student-based policy for the same thing. And in that one, it says race, color, creed, disability, religion, sex, and then in parentheses it says including sexual orientation or transgender identity, close parentheses, ancestry, national origin, English language proficiency, or social or economic background. So we're kind of trying already in terms of the student one, but we don't have it at all in the staff one. But as an LGBTQ person, it kind of insults me that it's in parentheses, because to me it's like an afterthought. It's like important enough to say, but not important enough to be its own thing. And the other issue is that it doesn't say how we're protecting people. So it kind of leaves it up that, if in any of our 9 buildings there's a situation, it could be dealt with differently. And as kids matriculate through our systems from our elementary to our middle to our high school buildings, they could be faced with 3 completely different ways in which that's being dealt with if we don't set out how this should be dealt with, generally speaking, across the district. And I think that's important as well, because there needs to be consistency for these students. They need to be able to know that they're always going to be safe, even if, say there's some principal at one building that's maybe a little bit more conservative. That's fine, but they need to be able to keep their students just as safe as maybe a more liberal principal might have.
So in a sense, you're homogenizing the policies across all the schools.
And bringing them out. We're doing a lot in terms of making them more specific, and our district's really good in terms of what we were doing already, but one of the issues in that is that if you're making these accommodations for, say, trans students, and you don't have any policy to back it up, and the state of Ohio is the most backwards, I think, state in terms of trans policies. We're only one of only 2 states where people can't change their name on their birth certificate. I mean, that's pretty bad. So there's no protections if somebody raises an issue. Say we've got a conservative parent that hears that a trans kid's changing in the boys' locker room because that's how they identify, and that parent raises an issue. We have nothing in our policy that protects us, and because Ohio law doesn't protect us, if they push the issue far enough, we're going to lose that case, because we have nothing saying that we give those accommodations. So I believe it's wonderful that we do give those accommodations, but we also, as a legal entity, have to protect ourselves in that. If this is something we're going to do, we need to say that we're doing it, so that when a parent does complain, we can say, that's what we do in this district. If you don't like it, I can't help you. That's the policy. Talk to the board.
Okay, and so these 2 policies that you talk about specifically, they are existing policies that you guys are seeking to make changes to, or are you going to replace them with?
It's changes and also adding on. So we're working to add like a separate kind of non-discrimination policy that talks about specifically gender identity and how we're going to deal with that. And that gets to something you had asked me about previously outside of here about policy providers. So we use Pepple and Wagner, which is our attorney, as our policy provider. And what they do is they separate students and staff. You have separate policies for each. We're going to OSBA, which is the Ohio School Boards Association. It's like the state group for all school boards to get information. They're going to be our new policy provider. They don't separate students and staff. They'll just have one policy. So we're kind of in this like weird state where we have to do it in the way that we have it now, but we also know that that's not how it's going to be in like a year. So it creates interesting difficulties, because what Gwen Stembridge gave us were OSBA policies, which we can't adopt because we don't have a contract for OSBA policies at this time. So we can't adopt an OSBA policy. And our lawyers can't just take an OSBA policy and give it to us as theirs, because that's intellectual property. So then we have to send what we have to them. They have to try to write it up in their own way to say the same thing, but not in the same way. And then we can adopt that, knowing that in July, when we start shifting to OSBA, we can just adopt the OSBA one and we're good.
Got it. Okay. So once the policy provider goes through all this, and the goal is for this to be finished up before fall semester.
Yes, that's my goal, is to get it in place by the beginning of the new school year.
So this all seems to make a lot of sense to me, and I'm sure to a lot of the people who listen to this, it'll make a lot of sense in terms of this being something that just sort of needs to be done. It sounds in some ways like it's just kind of crossing T's and dotting I's, if you will, in certain ways.
In a lot of ways, it's a formality, but it's a formality that is very formal.
Right, and it's more important than just a formality in the sense that, as you said, it allows people to be who they are. And so it's more than just a sort of an administrative thing to deal with, but it is an administrative thing to deal with, in that you need to have those policies to protect those people and allow them to be who they are. So I think a lot of our listeners would appreciate that and would understand that and think that it is a needed thing. But I'm very interested to know what, if any, pushback there's been. Oh, and so what I was going to ask before was the steps, right? So once you guys get the policy back from legal, do you at that point have to, as a separate committee, which includes Catherine Brugger, right?
Katie Brugger, our interim treasurer, our superintendent, Dr. Nichols, myself, and Patty White. So the four of us serve on the policy committee. I was appointed, and Mrs. White was reappointed to the policy committee in January, and I wanted to get on that because of this reason, and amongst other things that I'd like to get accomplished this year through our policy committee. So we got a first draft back from legal just last week, so we're planning to meet late June at some point to cover that. So we'll have a meeting school board wise. We have one in July and 2 in August. So the process, once it goes through policy committee and we're comfortable with it, is it goes to the board, full board, for a first read, because they don't know what we're doing, because we can't have 3 people at a committee meeting, because then it's a board meeting. So it's just the 2 of us. They don't really know all that we're working on. And it goes to them for a first read, which just means they get a copy of it, and usually 2 weeks later we'll vote on it. So it gives them time to read it, ask Mrs. White or I questions about anything they might have questions about, grammatical changes, other things that we might have missed, and then we vote on it usually 2 weeks later.
Okay. And so then to the other question, is there any discernible sort of pushback on this or resistance to this?
I haven't really heard anything personally. I don't think that people are honestly that aware of what the school board does, which is one of my frustrations in terms of that. Like I said earlier, people hear about the negative things and believe that that's all that's happening, but we try so hard to push the positive things, and they seem to have blinders to the good things that are happening. So I don't think people really know what we're doing, which is something I've been working really hard to try to fix. But nonetheless, I don't think, if somebody's really angry about it, I don't think they even know about it.
Right. And to that point, I think, so I do remember not too long ago, there was a little bit of a sort of, I don't want to get bogged down in conversations about things that happen on Facebook, but I guess it is newsworthy in the sense that, so you have been posting these little things that say sort of news you can use on your Facebook page, just to inform the public about what's going on as part of your hope to raise awareness about what the school board does, right? And there were some people who were frustrated in one particular instance that you had not included information in your initial post about the treasurer having resigned and all of that. I mean, I guess I wonder, what sense you have that there is going to be sort of an improvement in awareness about the school board, and what has been the success, in your opinion, of sort of these updates that you put online, and have there been other sort of pushback on other editions, say, of news you can use?
In terms of that situation, that was someone that was on the school board that I defeated for the school board. So I think honestly it's just sour grapes on the part of that person. But I don't claim that I'm telling everyone everything that we're doing, and frankly I can't tell everyone everything that we're doing, because if it involves a specific student or a specific staff member, they have a certain right to privacy that I'm going to protect. But in terms of that, there's a lot of boring stuff that we do that nobody would care about. We approve a lot of, service contracts for kids with special needs. I don't talk about those because, one, we don't have a choice. We have a duty under law to provide those needs to kids with special needs. And two, I don't think most people understand what that is or really care unless they're the parent of that kid with special needs. And in terms of awareness, I think the struggle is that there's 46,000 plus people that we as a school board represent, and the ones that seem to care the most are the parents. But from my experience that I know when campaigning is that most of our parents of our kids don't vote. I'm going down my list, knocking on doors of people that I only knocked on doors of people that voted in one of the last two odd numbered years election, because if they haven't, they probably weren't going to vote last year either. And we have these, Black Tiger Pride yard signs that we give to students when they enroll in the district. And every time I saw one of those yard signs, the people that lived in the house were not active voters. So the struggle is that the people that care the most about what's happening aren't the people voting on the levies and aren't the people voting for the school board members. So how do you bridge that divide? I still don't fully know, but I'm doing the best I can, because the people that vote aren't in the building. They're older people. Maybe they have grandkids, but even if they have grandkids, they're not as involved as a parent would be. So this is the difficult divide we have, and a lot of it's the demographics of our community, and it's the different demographics depending on which neck of our community you go to. One of the things that just about Cuyahoga Falls that I find frustrating is that we don't really identify our neighborhoods well, and I think it's something that Akron does very well. You always know which neighborhood you're in, and you kind of know what you're getting if somebody says they're from that neighborhood. Sociologically what that neighborhood's like, demographically what that neighborhood's like, financially what that neighborhood's like. And in Cuyahoga Falls, there's always been a reticence to identify our neighborhoods. But I think our different neighborhoods identified maybe by our 6 elementary school buildings, they each have a little bit of a different flavor to them. And we are in the buildings with the parents at events. You see that as well. And so I think if we did a better job as a community of being honest that, there are pockets of our neighborhoods that are very different from one another, not in a bad way, but just, some places that have less money tend to have a stronger sense of community, whereas some of our wealthier neighborhoods don't have as strong of a sense of community. And some of our wealthier neighborhoods where we have a harder time getting parents to be active in the schools, whereas in our less wealthy schools, our parents are always active. So I think if we're more honest about who we are as a community, it'd be easier for the community to be aware of what's going on.
So, and so I know probably I have to imagine that half the people you spoke to said, "Why do you want to run for school board? You don't have kids, right?" And I know you and I have spoken about this privately too. But I know you grew up in Cuyahoga Falls. You went through the Cuyahoga Falls school system, so you obviously have an interest in that sense. But can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, I think it's honestly dangerous when people with kids run for the school board, because you never really know if they're running for the school board to advocate for the community or to advocate for their kid. And so I see it as I'm able to advocate for all the kids in our district. I don't have favoritism towards my kid and the programs that my kid may have been in. I just look at it all and say, I'm not making a decision because I think this program's great. I'm making a decision because we have the money or we don't, or we have the resources or we don't. And I had that situation where a parent came and made a request for the elementary school that I went to, and I've obviously loved that elementary school. I went to it as well. And I looked her in the eyes and said, we don't have the money to do that. And if I have the money to do this for you, I've got these other buildings that are going to say, why didn't you do it for me? Why didn't you do it for me? And it was related to parking issues. We've got parking issues, frankly, in all of our buildings. So I can't have favoritism towards one building over the other. You have to look at the whole picture. And I think being detached in that way in terms of not having a kid in the district is a great service to the people I represent, is that I'm never going to just favor the buildings and programs that my kid is involved in. And that's a danger that I think people aren't as aware of as maybe they should be. And just, I've been involved with our school district since I was a freshman in high school. I know a lot about what we're doing. We're talking right now about changing start times at the high school. And I gave a little history lesson at the board meeting about the last time we changed those times because I was involved in that and I fought against it because I thought it was a bad idea. So it's that, I think there's an institutional knowledge that I bring that a lot of our administrators haven't been with the district that long. They don't even maybe have the institutional knowledge of the high-level decision-making that I may have had from my 14 years now of involvement in our school district.
Cool. So it gives you the ability to be an objective sort of party in conversations about the school district by not actually having a student in the school or a child in the schools.
Yeah, and I think that's important too. And I don't have an education background. It's not what I do either. And there's nothing wrong with that in my opinion, but it's also, I'm not looking at just what's happening in the classrooms. I'm looking at everything.
Great. Well, I guess just to close, maybe we could talk a little bit more generally about the city. There's been a lot of really good stuff happening in Cuyahoga Falls lately, and the Falls Free Press really wants to be a voice for some of the stuff that you don't hear as much about in the city. And I'm just kind of curious, like, what are some of your favorite attributes of the city apart from your service to the school district?
Well, I'm really excited about the new downtown, just to tie it in with the school district as well. We had our art walk. It's our fourth consecutive year we've had the art walk in it. I think it was even bigger this year because it was so walkable and people could, there were new buildings. Sandy Saffels with her Yum Yum Sweet Shop has been a phenomenal new partner in the district with our school buildings. And these people that are coming in and investing in our city, it's more than just investing in our city and their business. They're reaching out to our school district and asking how they can help. So I think it's that sense of community that we have, and I think this new downtown project is helping us develop a stronger sense of community amongst one another.
Good. Yeah, I finally took my kids into the Yum Yum Sweet Shop, which was kind of a disaster with 3-year-olds, but it's a really, really cool store on the inside, and I also really look forward to the downtown. I noticed that the fountains are lighting up now, and they have. It looks like they might have almost finished the new elevator in the parking garage too.
And the splash pad opened over the weekend, which my nephews are thrilled for.
Oh, it did. And do you have a brick? Did you buy a brick?
I did buy a brick. I haven't found it yet.
There's right
too
in
many.
The center, just about. I looked in all the corners and all the weird spots and found it almost dead center. So, well, thanks very much for joining us. This is just a sort of a production of the Falls Free Press. What we really want to do with these podcasts and interviews and things is just to sort of make this an extra bit of media that we can offer our readers on our website, so that when they see the article that we're going to print about the Equality Ohio speech to school board, they'll then be able to come and check out this interview by visiting our website. So thanks very much for joining us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
All right.